The former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine will be on Capitol Hill tomorrow for her public testimony in the impeachment inquiry. Marie Yovanovitch was removed from her position over the summer. Multiple witnesses in the inquiry have described a smear campaign against her, led by the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. State Department official George Kent described Giuliani's efforts against Yovanovitch as a, quote, campaign of lies. Kent testified yesterday alongside Bill Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine. In his opening statement, Taylor said an aide informed him President Trump told U.S. Ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, that he cared more about Ukraine investigating Joe Biden than Ukraine itself. The president says he knows nothing about that call. For more on all this, let's bring in CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez and CBSN political contributor Antjuan Seawright. He's a Democratic strategist, senior advisor for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and CEO of Blueprint Strategy. Antjuan and Leslie, thank you so much for being here. Boy, you have a long title, Antjuan.
Next time, please cut it. Just Leslie's friend will be fine.
That's right. That's right. All right, let's get to the good stuff. So, Antjuan, are Democrats doing enough here to get their strategy forward?
Well, I think what Democrats are doing are being strategic about how they elevate the conversation and roll out this process. Remember, this was only day one. There are more people who I think will have more juicy ingredients to tell coming up, but I don't think you can shoot your best shot when you start this process out, and I think they were smart and strategic about that. However, I think Democrats have to be extra careful to not fall into the Republican trap and let them define what our strategy is as they try to taint the entire process. And that was their goal from day one, to discredit so they can gain credit.
Right. So now talking about the Republicans, Leslie, I mean, we heard them argue that there was no direct evidence of the president's intentions. Taylor and Kent were secondhand witnesses. So do you think if we were to hear from a firsthand witness, like Sondland, perhaps, sure. who could clarify the president's intentions, that Republicans might change their mind on this?
It's really hard to say that another person can clarify what the president's intent was. We can't speak for the president. They could say, well, right now we have a lot of hearsay. They could say, I was here. This is perhaps how I interpreted it. It could possibly have an impact. But I think to my good friend's, point that he made earlier, it sounds like, season 2 of the same novella. We're just going telenovela, meaning a very dramatic experience where there's so much, in some sense, character assassination, and in another sense, kind of puffery around this idea of getting the president. So it's so hard to sift through that and understand what may be legitimate.
No lie, this is playing ball at a very high level. This is not B team. This is really varsity. However, there are two things that I think Republicans purposely forget. Number one, Trump admitted himself more than one time that he asked the Ukraine leader to dig up dirt on Joe Biden. He was unapologetic about it, followed up by his chief of staff, Mulvaney, who said that he intentionally withheld funding for the Ukraine.
And Leslie, to Antjuan's point, though, but there is a little flip-flop in the Republican argument. Sometimes
those two we have
he
receipts
didn't
for.
do what people are saying, and then they say, well, he did, but he's just investigating corruption, and that's what he says he was going to do anyway. So they're, on the one hand, they're sort of defending his actions, and on the other hand, they're saying, no, there was no quid pro quo. That wasn't his intent.
I think those are two of the same things, though. To say that it wasn't a quid pro quo, that you do this or you don't get dollars, they're going back and forth. And I think in terms of voters, they're seeing a lot of gray area there. If you're already sided with the president, you don't believe it. You think it's kind of a smear campaign against the president, kind of an ongoing investigation like they did under Mueller. If you're somebody on the left, you feel that he was always corrupt in terms of his business dealings, his personal dealings, and certainly in his governance as president. That's where the rub is.
I do want to say quickly, though, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today used the word bribery to describe.
That's a legal term.
Right.
Quid pro is almost like collusion.
It's a mouthful. Well, let's listen to what she said.
What was the bribe here?
The bribe is to grant or withhold military assistance in return for a public statement of a fake investigation into the elections.
So could we
that's bribery. Yes.
Could we be looking at an article of impeachment?
I don't know about that. We haven't even made a decision to impeach. That's what the inquiry is about. And when the committees decide that, and they will decide what the articles are. But I am saying that what is the president has admitted to and says it's perfect. I said it's perfectly wrong. It's bribery.
I just want to point out that's an exchange between our Nancy Cordes and Nancy Pelosi.
And Nancy asked a really great question there in trying to get a clarification. If anything, that's the breaking news.
Absolutely.
That what you're seeing now is the speaker escalating, and what I would argue is a predetermined outcome. She's saying, well, we don't know how innocent, and I don't believe that's genuine, that we don't know what the outcome is. The Democrats have been railing against this. They've already made a decision in terms of what they want to do with this inquiry. They're probably just thinking about which articles they want to vote on before it goes to the Senate. And I think that's probably the most truthful answer of what this whole...
Right.
But
You're probably
no,
There's no way. I think she's feigning this, and I think it's an escalation of
Democrats think they have enough evidence at this point.
As someone who advises the House Democrats, let me tell you,
Did you use the word bribery?
No, they're using legal terms. Let me tell you, as someone who advises the House Democrats, I can tell you this was not an easy decision for the Speaker and leadership to come to, because they knew what the political fallout or fall-in could be. And so I don't think there's some preconceived notion about what's going to happen. I do think they are purposely being very strategic and careful every step along the way, so they can do what she said in the very beginning: gather the facts and make the facts present themselves to the American people, and then let that be the guide.
But don't you think, Antjuan, there are a lot of Democrats who already think they've seen all they need to see, they've heard all they need to hear?
That's part's true, but the question is whether it is an alley-oop or a slam dunk. And I think what Democrats have to have, whether Republicans agree or not, no matter the narrative, is a absolute slam dunk. An alley-oop, you run the chance of missing.
I think that's another reason that the speaker is escalating the language to say bribery. She never said these types of words before. She was very familiar with this process is. And if anything, she's the most astute in navigating these political waters to protect the Democrats as they go into the 2020 election. This is not done without mud on everyone's boots. They all have a political purpose and a political agenda. And with the Democrats, it is to make political points, and they want to have this impeachment vote. For Republicans, it looks like more grandstanding and kind of a continuation to discredit. He would argue, I don't know that I don't fall in that camp, but discredit the 2016 elections.
I have a question, though, Leslie, for Republicans. Would it move the dial if, Molly Hooper and I were talking about this earlier, if it were clear that the president did withhold aid, which is something Republicans fought for? They fought to get that lethal aid to Ukraine.
Right.
If the president did withhold the aid for his own political purposes, if that were proven, would that make a difference?
If it was so clear like that and very evidential, I think there would be a pause. There has to be, and there's no doubt with that. I mean, if you put a Republican Democrat aside, the challenge is the way the whole effort has been orchestrated, like a soap opera. It is not making those points. It is muddying the waters more than it's giving clarity, and that's the distinction. The president and many Republicans will come back, forget Republicans, many voters come back and say he's asking for accountability. And we lose sight of the biggest issue, which is the Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, the idea that the specter of corruption related to that, and he's asking about those dollars. This is not unusual to think there's been corruption over there. We know this has happened.
Quick closing words, Antjuan, because we do have to go.
What's so important is the timeline of these events, and the president asked the day after the Mueller testimony concluded, and the fact is he asked at a time in which Joe Biden was rising in the polls. So if he was so concerned about corruption and all the things, why not 2 years ago? Why not now in this moment as we get closer to the
timing is telling you something.
Well, he had to get the dollars. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily.
And there's not one Republican who has disagreed, who has agreed that phone call was perfect in the Senate or the House.
Only Trump.
The one thing they do say is, okay, is it impeachable? But they have not disagreed as bad, and that's why you know you have a problem.
Guys, I love you both, and we'll pick up where we left off. All right, Antjuan, Seawright, Leslie Sanchez, thanks so much.
We're ready.